All right, welcome back to Brian Knows Movies. So excited to be talking about exorcism films. You saw the thumbnail, you know what it's all about. I'm Brian. I know movies. That's the whole point of the channel, I guess. I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Michael, who goes and watches a lot of these horror movies with me and agreed to talk a little bit about the exorcism and demonic possession movies this week. So yeah, Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself.
As Brian said, my name is Michael, and I do like horror films, especially the ones that are dealing with possessions. I find those to be the more the scarier ones. I'm not really too much into like slashers; they just don't really do it for me. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to be here, and thanks for inviting me, Brian.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. So, as you guys know, I love horror. That's my number one genre. My favorite subgenre of horror is the supernatural, and this is a subgenre of the supernatural horror films, which is your exorcism, your demonic possessions. I saw The Exorcist at a very young age. I was like 6 or 7 years old. Elementary school, seeing that crazy film, even though it was super old by that time. It's actually The Exorcist turns 50 this year, as it came out in 1973. 2023 said its 50th year anniversary, and it's still just as good. So imagine my excitement when we got two exorcism films last weekend and demonic possession films. I went and saw both of them, and they inspired this video. And I must be honest that I have thoughts. But before we get to that, something else just came dropped yesterday. The Boogeyman, a movie that they've been trying to make for over 20 years. There's been a whole bunch of different scripts that have been floating out there, and something finally got picked up, and we're finally getting a Boogeyman film. We're going to react to the trailer for you right now.
When there are scary things we don't understand, our minds try to fill in the blanks. Sometimes the best thing to do is to face it. So this light is going to be completely solid like it is right now.
That's the same girl from Megan, I think, isn't it? The little girl.
It's totally dark.
Is it?
So you can see that
It looks like
Yeah,
her.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
See? That's not so scary, is it?
Yeah, it is. What are you talking about?
Sister.
That's terrible.
You're doing okay.
Kind of reminds me of Darkness Falls. I don't know if you remember that film.
It's not real.
Like when they attacks at night.
Okay.
Like
Oh
on
yeah,
Twitch.
yeah.
It's all just in your head.
Hope Vega's there to help her.
Katie, there's something in my room. You believe me, don't you?
So this little girl didn't scream or anything at all. She's very calm.
I'm serious, Sawyer. I need to be alone.
It made me jump.
You're both having these manifestations. What is this supposed to be?
It's the thing that comes for your kids when you're not paying attention.
Dad, you have to listen to me.
Okay. I'm listening.
Sweetheart, let me handle it.
Yeah, so what you think?
So you said it took them 20 years to make this? Or to
Yeah,
finally get
it's.
into production?
I think that Stephen King wrote a short story back in like the late '90s or something like that, and they've been talking about it for a while. I think his short stories are. They tend to be pretty good in terms of the film adaptations. The first one that comes to mind is a movie that Sam Jackson was in, 1408, about that hotel room where John Cusack was like losing his mind because he's like some sort of author or something, and he writes books on the paranormal, and he was visiting the room, and they said don't do it, and he did it, and he ended up getting messed up in the room, basically. Spoiler alert. But that's the first movie that comes to mind when I think of his shorts. And I looked it up. That girl is actually not the Megan girl. She was in Bird Box though, and apparently she's in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show series from last year, but she's not the Megan girl. I was like, man, she just cannot catch a break. But maybe this is a prequel before the world ended and Bird Box happened. I don't know, but
Yeah, maybe.
I think it looks okay. It didn't blow me away. It's typical jump scares. There's this thing about having, ever since Hereditary, I think, the need or the desire to put the twisted demonic force on the ceiling as opposed to like crawling up on somebody on the ground or the side. And you get that imagery of, I think Malignant was doing that a little bit too. It's like, okay, that's getting kind of, I don't want to say it's getting old, but I see it a lot in films now. It looks okay. It comes out this summer, I think June 2nd. There are a few movies to come out this summer. Some horror movies that I think I'm a little bit more excited about. Talk to Me. There's a new Insidious film coming out. I have not seen a trailer for, but hey, it's Insidious. They don't really do anything wrong with that franchise. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. So if you guys are wanting to see or going to go see this movie, The Boogeyman, let me know in the comment section below. Moving on, let's talk about these films. So, full disclosure, Mike has not seen any of these films, at least the new ones, yet, in terms of the Pope's Exorcist and Nefarious. So I'm just going to be kind of filling him in as I fill you guys in about these films and get his reaction. So we had 2 films come through. The first was the Pope's Exorcist. This is a film that I was excited about because I'm always rooting for Russell Crowe, and Russell Crowe was playing the famous demonologist / exorcist Father Amoth, who worked directly for, I believe, the previous, I think it was the previous Pope, and he reported directly to him, and he was the Vatican's exorcist, and he was sent out on assignment to exorcise demons out of people all over the world. And the movie starts with like a conflict between him and this old school style of good versus evil versus a new set of priests and cardinals who think that demonic possession is not real and those types of things. Anyway, no one cares about that. He gets to this house, the Abbey, that's in Spain. This family just inherited from a husband that passed away, and they're trying to fix it up so they can sell it. Of course, that always goes well in these types of movies. And the little boy ends up doing something he wasn't supposed to do, being somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, just sit in your room. He ends up getting possessed, and now Father Amoth has to go and exorcise this demon of this very strong possession. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in this film. I was really excited about it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. It falls apart almost immediately. It's very silly in terms of the special effects. I didn't know if Father Amoth was a serious exorcist or if he was a drunk or if he was a stand-up comedian, because the tone in terms of that character changed every 5 minutes. It just isn't good. And I don't know what... Russell Crowe owned the 2000 to 2010 area around Gladiator and Proof of Life, all those films, and he was so good. And he keeps on making these really poor decisions in terms of his properties. That's why I keep on rooting for him, but he keeps on giving us stinkers like this. What was the last Russell Crowe movie you saw, Mike?
The Batman, wasn't that him? Wasn't he the Penguin?
No, that was...
Am I getting a mix up with somebody else?
Yeah, you're... man, what can I think of his name? He was in Banshees of Inisherin. He just got nominated for an Oscar for that.
I swear that was Russell Crowe. Maybe I'm getting my people mixed up.
No, it wasn't Russell Crowe. That's... why can't I think of his name? Somebody help me in the comments. Banshees just got nominated for an Oscar. I'm going to feel real stupid when I see his name.
Oh, Colin Farrell. That's
Colin Farrell, yeah.
Yeah, 2 completely different people. Yeah, well, I don't know the last Russell Crowe movie that I've seen then.
He was in this crazy movie Unhinged that was fun, but it was bad. He was had like road rage or whatever, and he basically started killing people who turned. But they've done that film before. I think that Sam Jackson did a film that was similar to that back in the '90s. He was in a movie I liked a lot with Ryan Gosling called The Nice Guys. That was probably about 6, 7, 8 years ago at this point. So that was probably the last good film I saw him in. He keeps on doing, and I like Les Miserables more than others, but he just keeps on picking these terrible projects. I will say, even though I am giving this movie a skip it, 1.5 stars, I have not laughed in any film this year as much as I laughed at The Pope's Exorcist. The ending of this film is so bombastic. It's so stupid. It breaks all the rules, even though it tries to also play around with the rules. We're going to get into the rules of exorcism and demonic possession movies here in a second. It is terrible. Terribly funny. This is a film I could see as a guilty pleasure. If you have a bunch of friends around and you want to put something on for 20 minutes, you can pop the end of this film on and you'll be good to go. There's a term that my friends coined years and years and years ago in college, and it mostly dealt with horror films. And it's this concept. It happened a lot in the 80s. It doesn't really happen anymore because the world's supposed to have moved on from something like this, but we called it senseless titties. And what senseless titties is having a girl, eye candy, if you will, just show up naked for absolutely no reason. Now, I never thought I would see senseless titties in a movie that has to do with the Catholic Church, but here we are. And it comes out of nowhere, and it's so stupid. From that moment on, it is just really ridiculous. If you want to go see The Pope's Exorcist, I can't really think of anything to say why you would, other than if you just want to laugh and try to hold in your laugh when everybody else is trying to watch the movie and be real serious. This movie is very unserious. Don't do it. Now, a movie I did not have fun with is another movie that I should have knew better, called Nefarious. Have you heard of this film?
I didn't hear about it until you had mentioned it. I didn't see like any type of previews or anything for it.
So they had trailers running in the theater for probably about 3 months now. It's all over YouTube, and they were promoting this film like it was a traditional horror flick, and it has a very, very strong trailer to it. And it's about this guy who's on death row who claims to be possessed by a demon, and he's supposed to be executed, but they can't execute somebody who is mentally unfit or has some sort of mental illness or anything like that, which is crazy because I could swear they do that to black people all the time, but not in this movie. If you're mentally ill or mentally unfit, they're not going to murder you or whatever your politics are on that. Anyway, this therapist is brought in to like determine if this guy's faking or not, and just trying to get a stay of execution. So that's what the film's about, I guess. It's a bunch of C-list actors, D-list actors. I thought that the people who were cast in this film were in it because the film was low budget, and it definitely is low budget. But I like indie horror films, so I still went and saw it. And imagine my surprise to learn that this is not a horror film. The horror is the terrible philosophies that they're trying to push on you. This is a very right, extreme version of fundamental Christianity that's going on in this film. I mean, it's something where basically the therapist and the supposedly possessed guy by the demon, they have a conversation basically for a whole 5 hours, I felt like. And it's the most boring conversation of all time. It's basically this demon talking about how we're the real devils because we abort babies and gay marriage and whatever else you can think of is like a fundamental Christian right-wing talking point. That's the whole reason for the film. Glenn Beck's crazy self shows up in this film for absolutely no reason other than to get a pop from the incels and the Glenn Beck crowds that they still exist for some reason. This is and believe it or not, even in saying all that, it's obviously a skip at 0.5 stars is my lowest rating I can give a film. That's what this film gets. It's still, even with all of its propaganda and stupidity, it's still not the worst movie that I've seen this year. The Devil Conspiracy that came out in January is still probably the worst movie of all time. I feel sorry for Nefarious because it feels like they really wanted to be the worst movie of all time, but the Devil Conspiracy said, hold my beer. So that's all I want to say about this film. It's not anything that anybody should see ever. It's the same people who wrote and produced and directed God's Not Dead and God's Not Dead Part 2 and The Unplanned, if you ever heard of that film. Have you ever heard of that film, Mike? It's that abortion film where some abortion activist that was truly trying to keep abortion legal, and they do it to like the nth degree. Like this person wanted like 8 months of abortions or something like really stupid, and they have a crisis of confidence, and now they're anti-abortion. It's like, Jesus showed me that I should be anti-abortion. Now, full disclosure, I talk about this film in these types of films in the way that I do because I do consider myself Christian, but I also understand that this is a very twisted form of religion that they make the world, it seems to the world that this is the standard of what Christians are, and it's a fringe, but a very loud fringe of Christianity that believes in this stuff. So Nefarious was nefarious for having me spend my money to go see that film. But I will thank Nefarious and Pope Exorcist for giving me the idea to have this conversation with Mike because, once again, I love exorcism movies. I really do. There's not too many films I like more than the original 1973 The Exorcist. William Friedkin is probably a top 25 director of all time. This is based off a book that William Peter Blatty's book, which used as source material actual notes from an exorcism that actually happened. And this introduced the world to this concept of exorcism having to cast out the devil. There had been ghost stories before and things like that, but it was all, it was really corny stuff. And then the Exorcist hits. People are running out of theaters, throwing up in theaters. I found this out today from a podcast, The Exorcist Files, I've been listening to as well. Mike, what do you think about this? The Ouija board was the #1 board game in the world at the time The Exorcist came out. The Ouija board in The Exorcist helps to bring out this demon or invite this demon into this house. It dropped precipitously, like it basically almost put Ouija board out of business. This movie, which is crazy.
That's amazing.
That type of cultural,
That's amazing.
cultural impact. I could talk about The Exorcist all day. What do you think about The Exorcist, Mike?
Yeah, I think The Exorcist, definitely, like you said, it's definitely a good film. But I don't know, when I saw it, I was in middle school, I believe, for the first time, and I saw it on TV as well. So I didn't even see like the uncut version of it. So a lot of it was edited. So yeah, I think by that point in time, it really didn't get to me, but I did see the inspiration that other films got from it. So I can definitely I respect it for what it has done and what it has influenced. But as far as it being up there for me and getting me scared, it didn't, just because it was such an older film and I was like in middle school. So I'm like, that point in time, like, okay, this is not scary to me. I don't see what my mom was so scared about when she saw it.
I saw this movie in the theater maybe, I guess it probably was 10 years ago because it was probably for the 40th anniversary. It went back in the theaters. So I saw it on IMAX. And it looked just as good as The Conjuring or anything else. I mean, it's really incredible how they do the practical effects. I don't know what you saw on TV that would be permissible for TV, because this is a hard R film with some of the stuff that they show. But I would say, teach their own. But yeah, I think that when you look at just the cultural significance, it's very high on AFI's 100. I think it's in the top 20 or top 25 movies of all time on the AFI 100. Sorry about that. I thought I turned this out. Yeah. So what The Exorcism does also is that it gave us a set of rules. And the rules tell us how these films are supposed to go about. So the first thing you see in these films, not all films, but this is something that you see in most of them, is that when you have a demonic possession movie, it doesn't even have to be an exorcist movie. Exorcism movie has to have an exorcist in it. Just that's like a duh. But you do have demonic possession films that don't have exorcists in them, and you see even in these films this type of setup. So they follow the stages of demonic possession that's given out by the Catholic Church. The first thing that you see is the infestation. So after a demon or whatever finds its way into the house or gets attached to somebody, that's when you start seeing the doors crack and the stuff fly around the room, and cabinets open and shut, things get misplaced, those types of things. You've seen that in pretty much any supernatural film, really. That happens. The second thing happens is oppression. This is physical attacks. People get really sick. People start to develop like whelps on their body. You start to see the demon try to enact violence on somebody, so they throw something at somebody, that type of thing. You start to see animals show up dead. So oppression happens. Obsession happens where the person who's being possessed is just kind of out of it. They're distant. They are, it says, sleeping all the time. They're unresponsive. And then finally possession. That's when the demon takes control. That's when you get the head spinning around and the levitation and the cussing you out and the deep voices and all that type of stuff. So those are the 4 stages that are presented by the church. Michael, how many times do you see that in films, and how effective do you think it is?
Oh, I've seen that in a lot of films, dealing especially with the supernatural ones that you mentioned. I think that it's not as effective anymore just because it's been done so many times. Unless somebody has like a spin on it, then I'm like, okay, I'm down with this. But for the most part, like you said, it's pretty much like copy and paste currently. So I mean, there are a few films that put their own spin on it, take it a different route, which keeps things interesting. But yeah, this is a good guideline.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem with these movies, is that you see this first with The Exorcist, and The Exorcist does it so well that, in fact, all of these tropes I'm going to talk about, they originate in The Exorcist, and they do it so well that it becomes very predictable. Like, no matter how many jump scares you put into a film, or how creative some of those jump scares are, some of the creepy things that you do in the film, it has this diminishing return in these films, because we've seen it over and over and over again. We have 50 years of Exorcist, demonic possession, and supernatural films to pull from. So it's kind of hard to get scared by these things unless they're done very, very well. The other thing that you see in a lot of films, not all of them, but there's some sort of crisis of faith. Either the priest or the minister that's doing the exorcism, a family member, usually your main character, the mother, the father. There's some sort of skeptic that's involved with it that doesn't believe in anything. You see this type of person in all these films as well. That's a very common archetype in horror movies in general, but especially these possession films. You see that they have to use the Roman ritual in a lot of these films. That's the power of Christ compels you. Those types of like really long prayers where they're trying to get the demon to say their name. You're seeing the possessed basically just wig out and do all kind of crazy stuff. And that's the battle. You see the spiritual battle between the possessed and the exorcist, and they're normally Catholic, and it's normally following the Roman ritual. You always see, I think this is like an always thing, where the demon makes the person who's doing the exorcism see something in their past, or see something that they did they didn't have no business doing, or something that they feel bad about, to try to throw them off their game. And then they just lie to them and tell them that they're trash and they're shit and all this other stuff. So those are the main ones. There's some other stuff from these films, but these are the ones I wanted to focus on. I just went through all 5. What are your reactions to those, Mike?
Yeah, definitely. And there was actually one film that I can't recall. I can't think of the name right now, but it like put a spin on it, as opposed to being more like in the Catholic faith. It was dealing with the Jewish faith. Do you remember that film that I'm talking about? Came out in the mid 2000s.
I do. It's called The Possession. It's called The Possession. And they used the Jewish exorcist instead of a Catholic exorcist, which was something that you have to do, and I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later as well. That you have to kind of get out of the Catholic space for these movies to be novel and to be unique. Unfortunately, the Possession I thought was really really bad. Outside of the it's actually like a Jewish faith instead of the Catholic faith. Outside of that, I think that the execution of that film was pretty bad. But that was at least interesting,
Yeah.
because you had never seen those types of rituals or prayers or beliefs. There's a lot of exposition in that film. I think they feel like they had to do a lot of exposition because nobody has ever seen a Jewish exorcism before or know the Jewish faith around exorcism. So there's a lot of exposition in that film that try to explain kind of what they're doing. And that was interesting, but the characters were terrible. Is the main thing,
And I think
I don't
another
think
one
that.
too. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's good. That's good. Go ahead.
I was going to say another one film too. I think it was like one of your top films for that year. There's a Netflix film. It's like His House or something like that. You remember that one? That dealt with possession as well, but it was different too. Took a novel approach to it, or like with the haunt, with the
It was
the
more of
demon.
a haunting than a possession,
Hmm.
but I guess at the end it was possession because that little thing got inside of the woman like right in like the last 15 minutes. Let me not do
Hmm.
spoilers on that. Go see His House. His House was a top 5 film I think of 2019.
It might have been
20.
2019, 2019, 2020. I know yeah, it was during the pandemic, I think, so it might have been 2020, right?
Yeah, yeah, but it's based off a very old African type of. I wish I could remember because I did look it up later on, like what type of faith it's connected to. It's something similar, like that the faith that demon or whatever was connected to. That witch, it was like a witch doctor,
Yeah. Hmm.
is connected to some stuff that happens in the Caribbean too, in terms of some of the. It's not voodoo, but it's like voodoo adjacent. Like it's some of the stuff that kind of helped to create voodoo, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that would be another good example. I'm gonna think about that. I should have put that on the list of something to watch out. But yeah, His House is great because it's different and it's giving you something that you don't understand immediately, as opposed to some of these other films. So yeah, so the blueprint for the exorcism films is right there. The issue, once again, is that it's unlike other slasher movies, or I'm trying to think of other types of horror. Slasher films, splatter films, body horror, all those have their tropes as well, but they're not as strict and binding as these. So you can still make some pretty creative films with slashers. Or I mean, slashers, for example, you're gonna have a final girl in all slasher films. Almost, it's a final girl. Sometimes they kill the final girl off as the final guy, but that's very very rare, and it tends to not be received well. A lot of times, slasher films nowadays they'll have multiple women in the movie that are kind of all main characters, so you don't know who the final girl is going to be, or they'll just have like Scream have multiple final girls, if you will. So, but they're not as constrictive. So I feel like you have to really challenge the form for exorcism movies to be good. Now, I say that Exorcist movies are really hard to pull off, but there's a lot of them that were pulled off pretty well. We're going to talk about some of those right now, starting with a film that came out in, I think this might be the oldest film on this list, 2005, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Scott Derrickson directs this film. He did one of my favorite films last year, The Black Phone. He did one of the scariest, if not the scariest, films of the 2010s, in my opinion, in Sinister. He's done some other things as well, but he's a big horror movie guy. This film is scary, but it's probably the least scary of all the films we're going to talk about. It's mostly done in flashback because it's a court procedural where an exorcism has went wrong and the person, Emily Rose, who was being exorcised, or they were trying to exorcise, dies. And the father who was doing the exorcism, what's my man's name? Father Moore, played by Tom Wilkinson, he's on trial for the death of this girl. And he's trying to basically explain what's going on with the exorcism and how things went wrong, but also how they tried to save her life as opposed to kill her. And it's a not guilty. And so you're getting all these flashbacks of what actually happened and how things just went terribly wrong within the exorcism. So it has those horror elements within the flashbacks. There is some stuff that happens to the lawyer. The lawyer's played by Laura Linney. She plays Aaron Bruner, who's the counsel for Father Moore. There's some stuff that happens to her that's kind of out of the ordinary. There's the demon seems to be trying to basically get Father Moore indicted. So he's interfering in places, but it's really these flashbacks and the story of Emily Rose that you get. And the reason I think this film works is because you still have those traditional things, in terms of how somebody becomes possessed. You have the Roman ritual, all those types of things. But since it's in the aftermath and it didn't work, you're also asking questions about mental illness and mental health. And is this really outdated? And is this doing more harm than good? And should this woman been in a center as opposed to being exercised in her home and all these types of things? So I think this film's really good and really good watch. Oh, this film on the list. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I remember seeing this film when I was in high school. And I was expecting it to be like, I see the exorcism in it, so I expected it to be like really scary and that it was gonna like keep me up for nights on end. But like you said, it's one of the horror films that isn't really focused on the horror too much. And I guess it's more like philosophical, like some of the questions like you mentioned, that some of the themes that they explore in it. It's definitely a good film, but yeah, it was definitely way different than when I saw it that I imagined that it was going to be. Because I was expecting, just like all types of crazy stuff to happen when I see Exorcism and like the title of the film.
And I remember when it came out that it wasn't received well because of that initially. I think people have gotten, they appreciate it more and more as time goes on. But when it first came out, I feel like people were like, "Oh, that was boring," or "That was stupid," that wasn't, people felt like they had got gypped because the form was challenged. But like all art, good art, it ages well as well. And I think that now that we've had even more of these films come out, that I think there's an appreciation for what Scott Derrickson did here. I think that his other film is scarier, obviously sinister. He did another film called Deliver Us from Evil, which is kind of like a supernatural exorcist like possession movie too. That was okay, but he also directed the first Doctor Strange. I don't know why. Here's an aside. So Scott Derrickson directs Doctor Strange. One. Sam Raimi directs Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Scott Derrickson is probably a top. It's hard to quantify horror directors because a lot of horror is indie, but in terms of mainstream, like money making and also critical successes, he's probably a top 5 horror director of the 2000s, 2000 to 2010, 2010, 2020, this century. Sam Raimi is a horror god because of the Evil Dead franchise and other stuff. Why do we have these films, and I'm a Marvel fan, why do they give these films to horror legends, if you will, and not let them lean 100% into the horror? I don't get it. Multiverse of Madness had some horror in it, but if you're going to get horror directors, you would think you're trying to tell a horror story, but they just would not get away from the superheroism of it all, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, the Multiverse of Madness, I remember people told me that it's supposed to be like horror based. I didn't really get horror from it, but once again, it's Disney, and I don't think they're going to go too much into that. But it would be pretty cool to see a superhero film. I know this is an aside, but that is based in horror. Like for instance, I'm a DC guy anyway, so I'm gonna put something out there like Swamp Thing, for instance. Like I think that could be a horror element. Like they could go full like a hard R for that. Or even like I think they're talking about the remake for Spawn, for instance. That's supposed to go more on the horror side. So I guess we'll just have to wait and find out.
Or even a movie that I liked more on rewatches, Constantine with Keanu Reeves had a very horror thrill. And it wasn't scary, but at least it had horror elements to it that wasn't contrived, if you will. as opposed to what these other films were doing. And I just like, you got the talent, don't handcuff them. Now apparently they're trying to go more dark in the MCU with some of these TV shows. I think Secret Invasion is supposed to be darker, and then also Daredevil Born Again is supposed to be fairly dark. So if they aren't lying to us, and they are, then maybe they can revisit Doctor Strange, finish the trilogy with him, and actually go completely dark. I mean, if he has to go into different realms and stuff, that should happen. But anyway, Exorcist of Emily Rose is not a superhero film. We're going to move on to a film that you selected. Do you want me to give the breakdown of this in terms of the plot, or do you got it?
You can go ahead and give the breakdown. I feel like you'll be better than me. Your memory's better than mine.
I haven't watched Paranormal Activity in quite some time. I am a big fan of the Paranormal franchise. Even the bad movies, I think, are at least entertaining and fun and funny. I think after Paranormal Activity 3, it went downhill very fast. But they still did interesting things. They had the detective that was running around town trying to figure out what's going on and I think that was either 4 or 5, where he was trying to figure out why all these people were getting killed. And he was approaching it like somebody else was doing it, as opposed to Toby the demon that was happening with this. And it's that type of stuff I thought was interesting. But Paranormal Activity 1 really changed the game. In fact, I blame Paranormal Activity more than I do Blair Witch for all of the really bad found footage films we got after it. But Paranormal Activity was a really good found footage film. It was a film about this couple who had just bought this house. It was their names were Micah was the guy, and Katie and Micah. And funny thing, the actors who played Katie and Micah, their names were actually Katie and Micah. That's how low budget this film was. And basically, weird stuff keeps happening to Katie. She talks about how, things have been happening to her since she was a child. So Micah decides to set up these cameras all over the house. And basically, you get them kind of like having slice of life, everyday conversations, and you're paying attention to what's happening in the background, paying attention to what's happening on these cameras when they're asleep. There's a lot of waiting, but there's a lot of payoff for that waiting. And it's one of the coolest theater experiences that I had as well. I saw this in the theater. It came out I don't have the number in front of me, but it came out in mid-2000s, or I want to say. And it's hard to get a theater, especially got a theater of kids or people, high school students who are trying to crack jokes and impress each other. It's hard to keep people quiet in the moments you need to be quiet. Everybody was quiet in the moment you need to be quiet in Paranormal Activity. It's so why does this film work? I have some ideas why it works, but I'll let you, since this is the one that you picked. Why does this film work better than most?
Yeah, so this one, I remember when it came out too, and I was in the movie theaters. Like you said, it was very quiet in there, and the payoff, it really does help, even though there's a bunch of waiting for it. But I feel like that builds the tension even more, and they did a real good job with that. Um, I feel like this works because there wasn't anything like it for a long time. Like most of the time, I think up until that point, there were a lot of slasher films and like normal like haunting type of films, like with ghosts and everything. But this one, it was a lot different. And as well, I think with some of the tension in the moments, it caused you. I know for me, for instance, like to look back and to kind of like think like, oh, I remember when something like that happened to me. Like I wonder if this is what it was. And another thing that I think really worked for it too is that we had no idea why this was happening. So it was kind of like it could happen to anybody, and that's what really like got me, because it's not like they did anything. Well, I mean, when you continue watching the series, you find out why it happened. But if this first movie was a standalone project, I feel like it would have worked better because it was just so random. Like it's like this encounter could happen to anybody, because in this first film they didn't state like anything specific happened to them like in their past or anything. We're just like, why is this happening? And that wasn't answered. Well, not in this first film anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I don't think we even got you knew it was something demonic.
Hmm.
The reason why this is not an exorcism movie, because there's no exorcist, but this is a possession movie. And the reason it's a possession movie is because it follows those 4 rules of possession that I talked about earlier. But it's so subtle because there's a lack of Christian influence or anything in the film. It's so subtle. It just seems like a bunch of random scary stuff happening to somebody. And Mike, I hope it wasn't happening to you because this girl got possessed. But but it's the found footage aspect of it, the removal of an actual exorcism from the film because they don't even know what's going on. The just to see this progression. The film's not even that long, but it feels like it goes on forever, and it gets more tense, and you feel the dread in the film. Outside of the jump scares, you're just waiting like, oh my God, why does this keep happening to him? And it was very creative, the little things that happen. This film is very cheaply made. $215,000 was the budget for this film. Guess what? Of that $215,000 budget, $200,000 of this film was marketing. So they shot this film for $15,000, sold it. They put $200,000, which really isn't a lot of money. A lot of this got marketed by word of mouth, and the film made almost $250 million in the box office off of that $15,000 initial budget. That's why the director, Oren Peli, is the name of the director. It was a passion project of his, but he didn't do anything. He didn't direct anything else, but he was able to produce all the Insidious movies. He was able to produce more of the Paranormal Activity movies and a bunch of other stuff that was really important to horror in the 2000s. And the reason he was because he had a bunch of money because his film went so well, right? So I like the film. It would be better as a standalone film, but I think
Gotta make the money, right?
Yeah, gotta make that money. I might as well not be a stick in the mud about it. I'll give it to him.
One other thing I would like to say about the film is when we're talking about like exorcism and everything, I believe it was in this film where they actually had a priest to come into the house, and then he left them because he was like, "Oh, I feel something in here," but he was like, "It doesn't like me being here. I feel like I'll tick it off even more." And then he just like left.
That did happen. I forgot about that.
Yep.
He was like, "Goodbye, I gotta go."
Yep.
I'm like, "Well, I'm going with you. What you mean? What you mean? Like, wouldn't you like leave the house if somebody like I'm like,
Right? Yeah.
ways.
I was like, okay, if he's leaving, then I don't need to be here either.
Okay. Once again, we're talking about exorcism movies. We have a couple people in the live. If you have any comments about any of the films we're talking about, or if you want to bring up any films, just put them in the comment section and we'll get to them. The next film is the film that I picked. It's probably the most controversial film on the list for me because I know that there's a lot of people who did not like this film. But I don't say I love the film, but I like this film a lot as an exorcism and demonic possession movie. The reason why I think a lot of people don't like The Rite is because it's probably the most traditional movie that you can think of in terms of going down that list of all the tropes, the issues with demonic possession in terms of how demonic possession happens, the trope of a priest that's having a crisis of confidence, or the trope of using the Roman ritual, and all these different types of things. But the reason The Rite works is because it uses those things, and instead of trying to run away from them, it runs towards it. It tries to do them really, really well. And I think that it does. The priest, for example, well, he's a priest in training. It's a guy by the name of, this is Colin O'Donnell, who plays Michael. Michael is in seminary school, and he goes to seminary school because he was a mortician, and he hated his job. But he's an atheist, but he decides to go to seminary school because he wants his college to get paid for. And then he plans to quit and denounce the faith once he graduates, so he has a free college education to go do something else. And he is unlike Father Karras in The Exorcist, who you're rooting for. You want him to reconcile with God, reconcile with his faith. You really do not like this guy. He's just like the most unlikely. I was hoping he was going to die most of the movie. And so because he was such a terrible character, you're rooting, like his story arc has to be that much better for him to be redeemed in the audience's eyes, while he's being redeemed in terms of the eyes of God in the movie. He has to redeem himself because, he is just annoying. He's full of himself. When the love interest, if you will, which is not really a love interest, but the female friend in the movie is trying to like get him to get over himself. You're like, don't. Why are you wasting your time with this dude? So that's an issue. The other issue is the reason why this movie works is because Anthony Hopkins, one of the best living actors, 2-time Academy Award winner, he brings a level of gravitas and deepness to his character. He plays a Welsh priest who's also an exorcist, and Michael is sent to basically be his apprentice to learn how to do exorcisms while he's in school after he gets the rank of deacon. And so he goes to this guy's abbey or monastery, I guess it's the same thing, monastery, where he's trying to exorcise the demon out of this little, well, she's like a teenager or whatever. And you see Michael be skeptic to start to like really believe something's happening. And something happens in the right, I'm not gonna give away, but it turns and it gets really crazy really quick too. And you don't see it coming. You actually kind of do see it coming when you think about it, because they do give you like little breadcrumbs. But once it happens, you're off to the races. And it does not work if you like the priest, Michael, or if Anthony Hopkins isn't as good as he is. And so that's why it works for me, even though it's very traditional. Michael, I can't remember. Have you seen The Rite? You say you may
So
have
I think
seen
I've
some of
seen
it.
like I might have seen it like a long time ago or like bits and pieces of it, but I don't remember it too well. I probably have to rewatch it just because I know you recommended it. So I'll probably have to check it out pretty soon.
Unfortunately, every film we've talked about so far, I looked up, and none of them are streaming for free anywhere except for like one that's coming up later on. Check Tubi. Tubi has a lot of these older films for free. You'll have to watch the ads with it if you have the app. But everything else you have to pay like $3 or $4 on Amazon or Apple TV or something like that. I don't know why, especially. I mean, I think the Exorcist is a streaming place. So I think it's on HBO Max.
Hmm.
But The Conjuring is not. We haven't got to that movie yet. That's next. The Right's not. Paranormal Activity's not.
Really?
Exorcism Emily Rose is not.
I thought that would have been Paranormal Activity. I thought it would have been on some type of
I
platform.
looked at all mine. First, if you go to if you type in a movie into Google, you'll be
Uh-huh.
able to scroll down and it'll tell you where you can watch it and it'll tell you where the streams are. Um, and From there, it'll tell you where it's streaming. But there's like some of it that they don't list. Like I don't think it ever lists Netflix or something, so you can go check your Netflix and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Jenma Gunther asked, "Did we discuss The Omen?" I'm assuming you mean the original, not the remake. We have not. That's actually not one movie. That's something that just completely sneaked by me. The Omen's really good. It's a little boy instead of a little girl. There's a
Damien.
remake. Yeah. Um, Let me get the director for The Omen.
So when did the remake come out? I didn't know there was a remake of The Omen. I don't remember. Maybe that like went below my radar.
It wasn't good. It came out in the 2000s too. The original Omen came out in 1976, so this would have been after The Exorcist. Gregory Peck, the lawyer from To Kill a Mockingbird, that's what I'm trying to remember his name. He's the father in it. And basically, it's this kid, Damien, who just is effed up. I don't know how else to say it. He does a whole bunch of crazy stuff, and I mean, it reminds me like The Good Son. It's kind of like an Omen ripoff, basically. But he's like, it established like The Exorcist established a lot of tropes for. The Exorcist established a lot of tropes for exorcism and demonic possession movies. The Omen, I feel like, establishes a lot of the tropes that we see, where you have like the evil little kid or the butthole little kid, the good son. Even Megan, the doll that was doing all that crazy stuff, Child's Play, the stuff that the doll was doing. It kind of reminds you of, because you wouldn't expect it, because the kid is children are supposed to be innocent, right?
Hmm.
And so you don't really expect it with that film. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, I think Village of
that's
the
a,
Damned was probably like really influenced by The Omen as well. You remember that movie with the kids?
I actually have never seen Village of the Damned.
I mean, you don't have to see. It's not a good film, but just having like the kids be the ones that are the antagonists for the movies.
Yeah. And Richard Donner actually directed The Omen, which is really strange for me. I know him from action movies. He did all the Lethal Weapon movies, and he did a lot of stuff with Mel Gibson, Conspiracy Theory, Maverick. I'm looking at his IMDb right now. So,
I think the soundtrack for The Omen was pretty good. Like whenever something happened, it was like that creepy music would come on.
uh,
I don't know
one thing
necessarily like who conducted it, but it was pretty cool.
one thing I do not understand and it goes to the kind of the bouginess of the um, there's a bouginess that exists among Hollywood. Obviously, that's why horror is never really recognized in a lot of when it comes to a lot of award shows and stuff. I still think Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary is one of the best performances of the past 10 years. She got no nominations because it was a horror movie, right? Anyway, horror has some of the best musical scores in all of cinema. Never nominated for Oscars, Golden Globes, Grammys, nothing. You hear radio silence, even though, I mean, how does the Halloween theme not get nominated? It's a classic, right? So
It's iconic.
let's go ahead and go to our next film, which is the one that I just mentioned, is The Conjuring. Do you want to talk about The Conjuring? You want me to set it up?
Yeah, you can go ahead and set up. Like I said, I think that your memory is better than mine. Like when you set it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember that happening.
I do take some notes to make sure to jog my memory on some stuff too. So, The Conjuring is a film that came out in
2013, I want to
2013.
say.
2013. We just talked about this, 2013. And it set up between The Conjuring and three movies kind of came out around the same time: The Conjuring, Sinister, and Insidious. And there's those three films that launched franchises, but also revitalized the supernatural horror of horror. We wasn't really getting that many supernatural films, especially good ones at that point. And we got a decade of really good supernatural horror because of these films. The Conjuring, even though I think Sinister is scarier, The Conjuring is probably the best adapted film of those three. And so The Conjuring follows these demonologists, Ed and Lorraine Warren, who have made it a career of helping families to overcome the evil supernatural forces that exist within their homes, within themselves. They partner with the Catholic Church oftentimes, and they go into these places to help to cleanse houses. They do some other stuff too. Like I think that Lorraine Warren, who is kind of like a psychic type of person, she helps people who like her talking to angels and stuff like that too. She helps interpret dreams. But what we care about is the scary stuff. So they're called to this home. This family had just moved. They always had just moved into a home, right? They just moved into this fixer-upper home, and crazy stuff starts to happen, and it gets increasingly more frightening into where they find the Warrens and ask them to come out to assist to exorcise the house and clean it of evil spirits. That's pretty much what it is without giving too much away. I'd say it's a full family. And I think it's crazy because this family, what's the name of this family? I wrote it down. The parents. The parents have like 7 kids, I feel like. And if there's something that happens to all of them in this crazy film. And so, yeah, what's your take on The Conjuring? Why do you like it so much?
Yeah, I like it so much just because I guess it is kind of traditional in a sense when you're thinking about like your haunting movies and everything, but they just did it so well, and it hadn't been for a long time until I had seen a movie like a horror film. I'm like, okay, this was a good horror film. It actually scared my wife too. The funny thing about that, She wasn't my wife then. She was just my girlfriend. But I had went down to Oklahoma and I had watched it with her, and she was real scared because she never saw a movie like that before. And then I left the next day, and so she was just like by herself, and she was just frightened. So that was pretty funny. But yeah, I just think that like the cinematography was good, and just like how they set up the story and everything, they did it very well. And I think this one as well, didn't it go more like it was a witch that was haunting them or something like that? Like it was the ghost of a witch, or because it was in one of those small, not small towns, but like on the East Coast in the old, area where they did like the witch trials and things, if I remember correctly. Or am I thinking of a different movie? Keep me honest.
No, no, you're. It's all mixing together, but you're pretty much on the same track. So in possession movies, the first sign of possession is infestation. So the demon comes in, and the demon comes into a place because they're invited into that place by some sort of something sinister or evil or something that's against God that somebody did. So a lot of times in these films, it's Ouija boards, but it's also the occult. The occult puts curses on things or curses on houses because uh, uh, the occult's a very wide range of things. Witchcraft, but I don't want Wiccans coming after me to understand that witchcraft means different things to different people. But these witches are trying to hurt people, so I put evil witches. And I think that was involved in The Conjuring in some sort of way in terms of how this demon got into this space. And so the people move into this house, and the demon didn't follow the people, if I remember. The people got into the house and were confronted by the demon. Is what I remember about it. And then the demon does what he does. I can't remember what the name of the demon was in this movie.
That's what I don't remember. So was it
Was it
actually like a
Was it
demon?
Bathsheba? I think it was Bathsheba. Was the
Yeah,
name
so it
of
was
it in this one.
Bathsheba. I thought that was the witch. Maybe I'm getting things confused, but I thought it was like a witch who was on trial or something like that. And then it was her that was haunting, did all the haunting and everything. That's what I thought it was. Maybe like I said, this is back in 2013, so this is like 10 years ago, and I don't think I've seen it since. But maybe I'm just like
Yeah.
remembering it
If
different.
anybody in the comment, anybody in the live stream knows, let us know because I don't
Yeah,
remember the specifics
I
of
might
it
have to
either.
revisit this film because I just remember it being like very well done. And like you said, like this, Sinister and Insidious is kind of like a revitalization or a renaissance of like these supernatural horror films.
We are getting the fifth Insidious film this summer. The last Insidious film wasn't that great. The last Conjuring movie I liked better than most, but it really wasn't that great. It was okay.
Mhm.
It was okay. It wasn't great. All the other Conjuring 1 and Conjuring 2 was great. Conjuring 1 was phenomenal. Conjuring
You
2 was
thought
great.
Conjuring 2 was great?
I thought it was pretty good. Yeah,
What? No
I thought it
way,
was
no
pretty
way.
good. I think that it had bigger scares, like because they had to up the ante, of course. I think it was slightly less successful than the first one, but very slight. I don't think I wouldn't put too big of a rift between those two. Conjuring, the Annabelle movies, The Nun was really bad. Conjuring 3 was okay. Conjuring 4, the reason Conjuring 4 wasn't good because they went, oh, and I understand they went against what they normally do with these films, where they're actually visiting a home and they act.
Hold on. What was the
They're more
Conjuring
like
4? You mean the Conjuring 4 is coming out, right? What was the Conjuring 4?
The Conjuring 4 was The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It.
That was the fourth one. So what was the third one?
The third one was
Because I remember the Conjuring 2, they're like in over there in UK, right? For Conjuring 2.
UK. The Conjuring 2 was the UK.
So what was Conjuring 3 then? I thought Conjuring 3 was The Devil Made Me Do It.
Maybe I'm putting one of the Annabelles as one of the things too.
Yeah,
Let me
maybe
see.
maybe it's like Conjuring Annabelle or something. Like it was an Annabelle and Conjuring movie.
Oh, that was the third one. You're right. You're right. So thanks for correcting me on that. The third one
Okay,
was The Devil Made Me Do It. So The
gotcha.
Conjuring
Yeah,
1
I'm
and
about to
Conjuring
say.
2 were good. The Conjuring 3, like I said, it's different. It's different. But we're getting a Nun 2 this year too. So they're trying to keep this Lorraine Warren universe alive. We'll see how those films go. The reason The Conjuring works for me as a possession film and an exorcism film, because that's part of it briefly. Again, you still have those tropes, and they're being um, faithful to a lot of the tropes in terms of the way that the demon interacts with the family, the way that demonic possession actually happens in this home, how this demon operates in the world, from trying to find the demon's name to help to cast it out. All that type of stuff is cookie cutter. But they introduce a level of professionalism to the practice of exorcism and demonology that you don't really feel with other films. Of course, you have professional demonologists that are coming from the church, but it's a faith-based professionalism, if you will. Whereas Ed and Lorraine Warren, they're doing kind of like a science, pseudo-science-y type of thing from the instruments that they use to try to, almost like Ghostbuster instruments that they use to try to detect type of things. I think that was what makes it the most interesting, and also just the cult of personality of Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga. All the films outside of the outside of Paranormal Activity, I think the reason why all of them work as well, on top of trying to do something different with the medium, is the acting's just really good. And if you don't have those characters and those character moments, you wouldn't care. That's why The Possession, that Jewish film you talked about, didn't work. Because I thought the acting was terrible, and the dialogue was bad, and they just had a good thing and they messed it up. So, go see
I
The
kind of want
Conjuring.
to say one more thing though. The
Okay,
Conjuring
yeah.
2. I don't see. We got to watch that again. That was not a great film. That was not good to me. It was just okay. And also another thing too that I'll say is that the special effects weren't that good either. Because remember, like the Crooked Man turned into the dog, or the dog turned to Crooked Man. Like that.
I,
It's just that CGI was horrible, man.
I love The Crooked Man.
Oh
I love
man,
The
that
Crooked
Crooked Man
Man
was so whack to me.
because no, the effects weren't good, but I think that the mood that they created before the Crooked Man showed up, like the atmosphere that they created. Yeah, The Conjuring 2 is sitting at 80%. I think it's sitting higher than the first Conjuring
We got to
on Rotten
rewatch that, man,
Tomatoes.
because it was. I remember it just being okay. I'm like, when I saw that, I was like, man, the first one was so much better. Speaking of the Conjuring universe, I don't think there's been the Conjuring. The first one to me is still the best film out of the series.
Yeah, it looked like Rotten Tomatoes. I talked about Rotten Tomatoes a lot on this channel about how to use it, but the aggregator has it. The Conjuring 1 is 86% on Rotten Tomatoes, and The Conjuring 2 is at 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. More people, more critics actually reviewed The Conjuring 2 over The Conjuring 1, which happens a lot with sequels. So when you see here's an aside about Rotten Tomatoes. When you see sequels get reviewed on Rotten Tomatoes and their score goes down, scores tend to go down with the more reviews that are out there. And especially with horror films, and I would say horror films and comedies, you see this more than anything, where you have a professional critic who has to just decide what to watch. And if there's no real hype on a movie, they don't go see it to review it. So you have more eyes on the sequels, and that drops your reviews down on anything, really. Not just horror movies, but when you see sequels, you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're trying to judge, okay, is this film good or film not? I always say the scores don't matter, though. Find some critics that like Brian, and Brian knows movies that you tend to agree with, and then get their take on films, get a couple of people, and that's a better way to judge as opposed to going through the critics score. There are some people who don't have any fresh movies anywhere on Rotten Tomatoes, and they're professional critics, so take that for what it is. The final movie we want to talk about is a film that I told that Michael I had a hot take on it. The Wailing. It's a 2016 film from South Korea. It's a bit of a chore time-wise to watch. It's almost 2 hours and 40 minutes long. I think it's 2 hours and 35 or 2 hours and 36 minutes long. It's a film about, there are these random massacres that are happening in this village, and a cop is trying to figure out what's going on or what's causing these people to basically just lose control and kill their whole families or kill multiple people. And then you find these murderers just kind of waiting in like a catatonic state next to the crime scene. And the cop is on location to figure out what's going on. He is the most bumbling idiot type of cop you can think of. I don't even know how he's a cop. He's just so inept. He's a joke. And he's not taking it as a joke, but he's not really trying either. They only have one lead. There's this Japanese guy who randomly just moved into the woods next to the village. So they're saying, okay, he's doing something crazy to people. That's all you have to go off of. This guy is comically bad. But he gets really serious when his daughter starts to show signs of like physical signs. You remember the way the possession works, and obsession, and then what am I thinking about? I'm sorry. I'll make sure I get this right. Yeah, oppression, obsession. When you start to see physical changes to people, his daughter starts to get the same scars that some of these massacring people have. She starts to have these mood changes, and he doesn't want the fate of his daughter to be the same as those that he's seen. So he gets really serious about trying to solve this crime, and specifically what's going on in that town. But he's still really bad at his job. So yeah. In the background, he hires a shaman to try to exorcise the bad spirits on his compound. There's another shaman that's doing something in here. There's people who you don't know if they're real or they're not. Are they ghosts? Are they spirits? Are they demons? It's all types of crazy stuff happening in this film that I don't want to say too much about because not enough people have seen this film to really spoil. The wailing works because it's completely inhibited from this Western idea of film and possession moves that I talked about. You do see some of those 4 ways that people get dispossessed somewhat, but not all 4 things exist. And also, it's in a different framing than what you would think of this Western Abrahamic religion type of thing, right? So it's completely inhibited. It's completely unique. I rewatched it for this. I watched it when it first came out. I rewatched it 2 nights ago in preparation for this podcast. I am saying, in terms of my seal of approval, The Wailing is the second best Exorcist movie to ever come out. It's the second best, only behind the original Exorcist. I think it's better than every film that we just talked about today, and I think it's better than a lot of horror films in general that I would probably recommend that's come out in the past 10 years. It is that good, and it is that enthralling. The thing that I love about South Korean horror specifically, and also just Asian cinema, I'm thinking specifically Japan, Korea, China. I don't know what they do in terms of the way that they do their training for acting, but I think that there is some sort of school that I probably need to do more research on, that not actual one school, but a school of thought in terms of acting, where they're able to emote so well with just their eyes. They're able to convey so much emotion with their eyes, and they do this thing in their films where it's very restricted, where they're holding the emotions in, so you can only read it on their face and only really on their eyes. You don't really it's kind of like stone face when they're looking at you, but it's not, right? And eventually there's a breaking point where those emotions flood to the forefront, and it's so effective because it's not gradual. It's like you see the emotion that's like, it's piercing emotion just through the eyes, and eventually the character reaches a breaking point and they just completely melt. And it's effective every single time I see it. You don't really see that with Western type of acting. There's usually some sort of crescendo that happens, but it's like boom in your face. What I'm trying to say is that this movie's well acted. The story's incredible. It is completely original. The best exorcism movie of all time, only second to The Exorcist. So with that type of seal of approval, Michael, I know has not seen it. Are you going to go see it? And this is actually a film you can find for free. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on Tubi. I think this is the only film that's on the list that you can find for free in different spaces.
Yeah, you're speaking my language. It's free. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'll check it out actually this week. Hopefully maybe on Friday I can check it out and let you know what I think about it. But that's a long time though. You said it's like 2.5 or over two and a
It's
half hours for a horror
the re-
film.
the reason why it's a chore, at least it was a chore for me, is that it's a 2 hour 40 minute movie, basically start to finish, and I don't have problems with subtitles because I watch a lot of anime and I like to
Hmm.
listen to original language as opposed to dubbed. But that's a lot of reading and trying to pay attention to this film if you're not used to it. So that's what kind of makes you tired with the film, is that you're reading so much dialogue to get the dialogue. But outside of that, I think that I don't know what they would have cut. Maybe they could have cut some of the goofiness of this terrible police captain or whatever in the beginning, but that still establishes character. So I don't know what they cut. I really don't.
So I have a question for you. So does this like genuinely scare you? Did the film, or was it just a good film?
Um, there are two scenes in the film that I find scary. One is actual like traditional horror, and the
Hmm.
other is like the horror of what humanity does when it's at its breaking point. It's more like a philosophical horror, like it's like I can't believe you're doing this type of thing. Um, but it's much more dreadful, I guess, in terms of the way that the tone is with this film.
Okay. Just because I feel like, and maybe it's because you can feel this way as well, but you become desensitized because you've seen so many of these type of films, where it's
Yeah.
like you really don't get that scare like how you used to. And I've kind of like been chasing that. I haven't found that in a long time, so I have been looking for a film that's like going to actually genuinely like make me, question like what's that noise I just heard, or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I haven't like come across that in a long time, just because like you said about the tropes and everything, you kind of know what's about to happen. So, but maybe
I'm
this
trying
will
to
do
think.
it for me. I mean, if you said
Yeah,
there's like two of them in there, like two scenes. So,
I'm trying to think of. There's also a in this film I think is really unsettling is when the shaman's doing the rituals, and there's like this shaman battle that happens in the movie, and it's really unsettling mainly because I have no frame of reference for the religion that they're doing, and it just all seems like really nuts to me.
mhm.
Um, I'm trying to think of the last film that really scared me. Was it His House? There's had to be something to come out since then.
His house scared
Uh,
you?
it did. It
Really?
did.
Huh? Because we saw that together.
You saw it at my house, yeah.
Yep. Uh huh. We saw that at his house.
I guess uh, he's on his house at his house. I'm trying to think of another film. Uh, Here's the thing. I fall for jump scares a lot,
Okay.
and I don't think that jump scares. I don't quantify jump scares as being scary. I just as more as surprising.
Yeah, I don't either,
To
but like I'll say like Hereditary for me might have been the last film that like genuinely got me.
Hereditary
And
was
it
really
wasn't really
bad.
because like
Yeah.
the jump scares or anything, but it was just like the entire mood and how there was a lack of I mean, like sounds and everything. It was yeah, it was just real unsettling, and that got to me.
I think that's why I thought Sinister was so scary, is because there's no jump scares in Sinister that I can
Hmm.
remember, but it's just like this crawling fear that you get as you see this stuff unfold on these videotapes, and it's just crazy. You know what
And I would
one?
say Sinister more so gets to me now because I am a parent. So when I first saw it, I was
Oh
like, if I
yeah,
was a parent, this movie would have got to me like crazy. But now I am like, yeah, it's a good thing I didn't see this like later on.
Parenthood. If you for my followers who don't have kids, man, when you have kids, you watch a lot of stuff, and you have to learn a lot of things, a lot different than what you did before they came, because it's just like I don't know, it's crazy. There is a film I just remembered that I think was really, really, really scary that I wanted you to talk about.
Yeah.
Oh
So yeah, The Sixth Man. When you talk about possession films, this has got to
my
be up there,
god.
like in top five of all time. Like it was just so crazy how how your body can just be taken over by somebody that knows you so well, and they're just living out their dreams through you, and there's nothing you can do about it, and they're able to like hit you and do all types of stuff.
Look,
It was,
look,
and then when you really need them the most, they're not there.
look at how sinister Kadeem Harrison's face looks in this film. He's the guy that's possessing Marlon Wayne. Marlon's like, wow, my God, what's going on with me? And this evil Kadeem Harrison, I don't remember any of their Hardison. I'm sorry, not Kadeem Hardison. I don't remember any of their the names. This, um, Mike sent this and said, "Hey, we gotta talk about this film," and I forgot this film existed until he said something about it. But it quantifies as I don't know if demonic possession. I don't know if he would consider his brother a demon, but it could definitely quantify as a possession film. I did not look up to see if this was streaming anywhere. I kind of doubt it, but I also doubt it's going to cost you more than $1 or $2 to rent if you've never seen The Sixth Man in theaters or anything like that. So. Yeah, I think that's all of them. Long story short, I'm probably going to go see every exorcism and demonic possession film out that comes out, even though there's diminishing returns. So I'm hoping that I get another Wailing or Conjuring or something like that in the future. Horror is in a very interesting place right now because we're starting to see another shift. It was a shift to supernatural in the 2010s. Now we're starting to go into more of like a cosmic type of horror space with a lot of the, especially independent films that are coming out. A lot more. I can't think of
Like
the word.
extraterrestrial, like you were saying, like even like, and I guess it's not cosmic, but Nope, for instance, doesn't that qualify as like a horror film? Or is that
Yeah,
more of a
horror.
thriller?
I think it's more of a thrill. I don't think Nope is. I think Nope's really good, but I wouldn't consider it horror. He probably consider it horror.
Hmm.
I'm thinking Lovecraftian. That's what I meant. Lovecraftian horror.
Oh,
So
okay.
like just the idea is what's scary as opposed to what you're seeing on screen. I talked about a movie called The Outwaters that came out a little while ago. You had the Skinner Marink movie that came out. Like, you're starting to see like these really kind of people who are playing with the medium and trying to get past what you would typically consider a horror and get more into like more original stories, which is interesting. We haven't had anything mainstream like that happen yet, though. So maybe it will happen. But as I said, you got Insidious coming out. You have this movie called Talk to Me, which is a supernatural horror movie that comes out. It's probably the one I'm most excited about this summer. You have just a bunch of stuff. So Mike, any final thoughts? Favorite horror, and also tell us your favorite horror movie of all time.
Favorite horror film of all time? I don't know if I have one actually. I can just go for like one of the more recent ones, I guess 2013, The Conjuring, just because it was such a good film overall. Maybe that's not my favorite. Oh no, sorry. Okay, I'll say the horror film that got to me the most when I was younger, and probably not so much now, but the original It. And I know that a lot of people are probably like, yeah, the special effects stuff are bad, but whoever played It, I can't think of his name right now. He really scared me as a kid.
Tim
As a kid.
Curry.
Yeah, just the actual clown, Pennywise the clown, in itself got to me. Not the actual monster, but like just that clown got to me. So I'll say It. That's the one that scared me the most when I was a kid.
I still believe that the best horror films have minimum special effects anyway. Like, if the more practical it is, the more evergreen I feel like a lot of this stuff is. So, and nothing wrong with that. It 1980 or is it 1990 when it first came out? It was a TV film, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was long. I
Um,
remember that.
yeah, because it was broken up into 2 parts
Hmm.
or 3 parts, something like that. But I can't remember when it came out. Anyway, thank you, Mike, for coming on and joining me. Next week, we are going to have a really fun time because it's time to talk about summer movies. We're going to have a summer movie draft. We're going to have some special guests come on, and we're going to look at the full slate of films coming out this summer, and we're going to draft which ones we believe are going to be the best. There's over 50 films coming out this summer. It's actually packed. It's a much better summer slate than I think it was the last few years. Probably the best summer because we're truly out of this pandemic area. At least that's what Joe Biden said a couple weeks ago. The pandemic's over or whatever. So go to the theaters. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you, Michael, for helping me out today. And we'll see you at the theaters next week.